Welcome to a brand new episode of IDTALK for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. If this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that you return back for future episodes and new content. And if you are a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, I welcome you back and I hope that tonight's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and of course, insightful. So before we kick things off with our special guest, just want to remind folks on YouTube to click that red subscribe button so you can get notifications on future episodes of the IDTALK Educators Live podcast and other future content under the IDTALK label. You'll find it under my name, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. That's KWAMESARFO-MENSAH for those who are listening on Apple Podcasts and other streaming platforms. So make sure you connect with us so we can stay connected and you can get the latest updates on what we're doing. Thank you kindly. And today we're going to be talking about something that is deeply personal for me. So for those who don't know, before getting into the podcasting space and getting into consulting, I actually entered this education space as a math teacher. So that is what brought me into education. Math is what got me through college. Math is what got me through my K-12 schooling. So math represents a huge part of my identity. And one of the things that I recognized when I got to my undergrad years at Temple University was just the fact that there weren't a lot of people who looked like me and who loved math as much as I did. And I really started to see some of that racial divide when I got to college. And then I started to see it more when I got to the classroom and just the implications that come with, race in terms of mathematical ability. So we're going to get into all that and more and really do that deep dive. So today's guest is somebody who is just a brilliant brother. I had a chance to connect with them a few years back during a Black Educators Rock conference, and he is somebody who is equally, if not probably more passionate about math as I am, but also how that perception of math needs to change for Black people and all other marginalized folks in our school system. So without further ado, I want to bring on this good brother, Mr. Akil Parker, to the podcast, and we're going to get it in, have this conversation. Yes, sir. What's going on?
What's going on, man?
How we feeling?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Yeah.
But every day is good, though. Every day is good.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. So I know you heard a little bit about my background and what got me into education. So I'm going to go ahead and pose this same question to you. So what got you into the education field? And also just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the answer to that question. I took a non-traditional route to get into the education field. Honestly, I needed a job. So, I was a finance major in undergrad. And I did work for 1 year after my undergraduate studies as a bank examiner, and that wasn't a good fit for me. So I left that position. And then I kind of was just, I was looking for a job because I had a baby on the way. So I had grown man responsibilities that I had to provide for. I needed, there were economic reasons, why I just needed some employment. So I started thinking about teaching. I ended up doing a long-term substitute position at a school in North Philly. And, I taught, 10th grade geometry, had about 4 classes of 10th grade geometry. But I was a long-term sub. So, like as a substitute, you're basically just there just to supervise and make sure like nobody hurts nobody. But then when you're a long-term sub, you have to take it a little more seriously because you're going to be there every single day. So, I was doing lesson plans. Of course, didn't know how to do lesson plans, but I was trying to do the best I could, with the resources I had for that, fourth quarter of that school year. And then, the next school year, I decided to, pursue teaching seriously full time. So people told me that charter schools were more lenient in terms of hiring people that were not certified to teach already. So I found this directory of charter schools in Philadelphia, and I looked for the fax numbers. This is back in the day with facsimile machines. So I found the fax numbers, I think, of all of the high schools, charter high schools that I could find in there. And I sent my resume. I ended up getting hired by World Communications Charter, which used to be in South Philly, right on the corner of Broad and South. The building is still there, but the school's since shut down. But that's where I really started my teaching career. So I kind of out of desperation, not real desperation. I mean, I wasn't in danger of being homeless or anything like that, fortunately, but I needed steady employment. So my entry into education wasn't really noble, so to speak. You know, it was more about my personal needs to be able to provide food, clothing, and shelter. And as I said, I had a baby on the way. So,
Right.
you know, I knew I had grown man responsibilities that I had to tend to, in addition to being able to, you know, maintain a roof over my own head and whatnot. So that's how I initially got into education. But once I got in, you know, things changed. I started to take it much more seriously as I started to see like what the needs of the students were. But if I could back up a little bit, one of the reasons that I did want to teach also was because, or I should say, the reason why I thought teaching would be a good fit for me is because I was always a good student for the most part throughout my K through 12 experience, and also in college I was a good student. I always prided myself on being a good student, you know, being, you know, strong in my academics. That was very closely tied to my own self-esteem growing up, you know, being like, oh, you know, he's the smart guy, he's the smart kid, you know, so
Right.
school was always comfortable for me, you know, so I figured, you know, go be a teacher, you know, be in a school, be in a space that being a, what I always felt was like a safe space and a comfortable space for the majority of my own personal life. But also I wanted to be able to provide like a positive influence. And I didn't want to just be one of these elders or older people that was just critical of young people without
Yes.
doing anything to try to provide them with a better way, or provide them with guidance, you know, insight, so they could like make better decisions and not be as irresponsible, shiftless, you know, all the things that like I would often hear, whether it was when I was growing up or even as an adult. I would always hear people being so critical of young people. But a lot of the people that were very critical of young people are either like not doing anything to provide any guidance for the young people, or they just, you know, sit back kind of on their high horse and just blame their parents and just say, well, you know, their parents should do better. So I wanted to be in position to really add value to the lives of the young people. So I felt that being in a classroom, I would be able to do that. That's why I first went into education.
No, that's what's up. Shout out to Philly. So, you know, being a Temple alum, you know, Philly has a special place in my heart, man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I really discovered the passion to teach. You know, I lived in North Philly, you know, in the beginning. Started out in funny, the very first school I worked at was William Penn High School. That was used to be at Broad and Girard. That's not there
Yeah.
no more. So for
Well,
anybody who so for
it was a
anybody who
soccer field.
yeah. Oh
It was a
really?
soccer field, but now they're building another building on top of that. I'm not sure what the building is, but yeah, there was a lot of pushback from the community about them. Well, first closing it down, and then them tearing the building down, and then like Temple, like I said, they built a soccer field there. Now the soccer field is being constructed on top of now. Yeah, I used to go to that gas station all the time. That Sunoco right there,
Oh yeah,
right
yep.
across the street from it. Yeah,
And then, you know, you had like the I think it was a Checkers that was at
yep,
that same intersection too. So
yeah,
I'm dating myself. So this is like 2003 when I went into
mm-hmm.
William Penn High. And for those who aren't familiar with Philly and just kind of the history of the high schools, William Penn High, from my understanding, at one point was like a really good school. Like there was a lot of vocations there, so people would go there to learn like vocations and different trades. And then over time, things just kind of slipped. So like when
Yeah,
I got there, it was kind of like on the down, it was like kind of on the downside. So there were a lot of, you know, issues with discipline, and there were issues with like turnover of teachers. So they were going
right,
through a lot of transition at that time. So, you know, me still learning Philly and coming from Connecticut, where like I didn't have that in city experience. Like I lived out in the suburbs and stuff. That was eye opening for me. I was
yeah,
there for 2 weeks for an externship. And I think during that first week, I was trying to break up a fight between a couple freshmen.
yeah, yeah,
And I end up getting socked in the process. You know, not they weren't trying to hit me, but they're trying to get at each other. But
yeah, yeah,
it but that was an eye opener in many ways. Really taught me like there's levels to this. Like if you're
mm-hmm.
gonna teach, you know, in this environment, like you gotta expect those things when it happens, and you gotta be ready. And that was like one of my first experiences. But then from there, I spent some time at Tanner Duckery School, right around the
Yeah,
corner
on
on
Diamond Street.
Diamond Street, you know,
Yeah,
15th Diamond. So I was there, you know, a couple years after I finished my undergrad, and then I went back to Temple for my master's, and then eventually I ended up teaching at different charter schools. So I was at Russell Byers Charter School
mm-hmm.
for 3 years. Then I was at Kepler Charter School, which is no longer existing, for another
Right,
3 years. before moving to Boston, with my wife. So Philly has a special place in my heart. That's my second home. Love Philly. Some of the best years I've had in my life, but that's just me. All right. Now let's get back to you. So you mentioned that you want to have a positive influence on students and do things in a different way that maybe some of your elders and other elders you've seen were doing things in terms of how they were interacting with students. So I want to go back to just your time in college, because unlike myself, you had the privilege of going to a HBCU. Matter of fact, too. So I know
Yeah.
you were at Cheney at first, and then you eventually went to Morgan State. So I want to know how being at a HBCU, too, in your case, really impacted your life and shaped your development as an educator and just an overall human being.
Well, I need to make a correction. So for undergrad, I currently teach at Cheney. I never took
Oh, you
coursework
teach
or
at Cheney.
studied at
Okay,
Cheney.
all right.
Yeah, I teach at Cheney. I earned my bachelor's degree from Morgan State after but if you want the whole story, for my freshman year, I attended Morehouse College as a freshman back in
Oh,
1997.
you're ATL. That's what's up.
Yeah, yeah, I was down in Atlanta. That was actually
Yeah.
the last year that they had Freaknik. I'm dating myself
Oh, wow.
too,
You
right?
date now you dating
Yeah,
yourself now.
yeah, dating myself too. So that was the year that I was down there as a freshman in Atlanta. I ended up transferring years later after I'd been a teacher in Philadelphia. Then I went to another HBCU to get my master's degree in educational leadership. I went to Lincoln University, not on the main campus, but I was, at the Graduate Center, which is near 30th Street train station. So yeah, so that was my HBCU experience, like from Morehouse to Morgan, and then years later to Lincoln University. So yeah, so that definitely, it definitely had an impact on me as a student and also as a scholar. I will say that there were a lot of changes, like in terms of my outlook and my worldview. I became much more, I would say, African centered by the time I got to my graduate studies at Lincoln. Whereas, when I was an undergrad at Morgan, I was just more individualistic, more just focused on myself, just trying to get my degree in finance and really trying to go to Wall Street and be an investment banker or some type of like equities trader or options trader or something like that. I really wasn't really concerned about building community, wasn't concerned about Pan-Africanism, wasn't concerned about a lot of the things that I'm concerned with now. I just
Right.
really was trying to just more so probably as a young college student, in my late teens, early 20s, just trying to like assimilate into America. That's really all I was mainly concerned with. And even like back then, what I say is that if I could compare and contrast my educational experience as a graduate student in my early 30s compared to my experience as an undergrad in my late teens, early 20s, my undergraduate degree was mine. I saw that as mine, something I did for me. But, my graduate degree was really, it was for the community. It's for the people, because the things that I learned and the things that I studied, I was there studying so I could really provide for the people, and provide education, to the young people in the community, of the community. That was my purpose. So
Wow,
I
that's
think
what's
that's
up.
like the main difference. But the HBCU experience is critical. It's definitely critical. It's definitely key. I love HBCUs. They're not above criticism, and I think that I kind of adopt the approach that Dr. King had. About America. Dr. King had. I think he, at one point, he definitely had a love for America, and his love for America made him feel that we should criticize it and challenge America. He felt that he should challenge America to live up to its noble precepts, in all of its writing and everything. So I kind of feel a similar way about historically Black colleges and universities. I think they do have a great deal of potential to be spaces where we can train scholars to help us to independent nation build, but we have to do some things differently. We have to do some things differently in order to make that a reality for us, while also appreciating a lot of the positives that are in place, right now, and leverage those things,
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think there's a lot more attention being placed on HBCUs, and not just within the athletic realm, but just like overall, like there's a more
Yeah.
attention placed on it. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we invest in those universities and
Mhm.
institutions because there's so much rich history behind them, and we have to make sure that we're maintaining the original purpose of HBCUs so that it doesn't get co-opted, right?
Right, right, right.
By
And
folk
I
who
also
aren't
want to
gonna.
say, something else about that as well.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned sports, that reminded me of something that I think that with the increased popularity of historically Black colleges and universities, I think when our students, when they make decisions to first attend a historically Black college and university, which I heavily encourage and advocate for, I think they should take the approach that athletes take. Whereas, athletes, they're being, sought after, all over the country by, different coaches. But then, they understand that they make decisions based on, okay, well, who's the coach? Right. What type of offense do they run? If I'm going to be an offensive player, what type of defense do they run? And do I want to play in that system and for this type of team? So I think our students that may not be athletes, I think when they decide that they're going to go to a historically Black college, I think we have to create some type of infrastructure and some type of system where they can find out, okay, well, if I want to major in biology because I have aspirations of being a doctor, or if I want to major in mathematics because I have aspirations of being a math professor one day, who are the professors that are, in those departments, and who are they? What have they written about? And, what is their track record as professors? So, they can make more informed decisions in terms of choosing those institutions, instead of what a lot of people do is they kind of just default to like what's popular. I know Howard University is a very popular school, and yes. Howard University has some serious, academics there that are, capable of teaching. But a lot of our students, we kind of we go with what's popular, what's trendy, and what's cool, and what schools have certain reputation. I would even argue that my own decision to select Morehouse College as a school I went to back in 1997 really wasn't informed by, who were the professors, what was the department like. I mean, I knew they had originally I went into school as an engineering major. I knew they had an engineering program. They had this like 3-2 program where, you do 3 years at Morehouse and then you go to Georgia Tech or go to another school with an engineering school, finish out, matriculate there. I didn't do any like really serious study. Like, okay, who are the professors I'm gonna have, their track record, where else have they taught, what papers have they published, what do they get into? Like, are they good human beings? Are they good men? Are they good women? How do they get down? Whereas like, I think athletes a lot of times, they do more of a specific analysis of, or at least people that are around, and maybe their high school coach kind of assist them with that in some cases, where they're saying, okay, well, you go into this type of system or this type of, offense that they run, this will be a good fit for you. Or like in this basketball program, this will be a good fit for you, or this school won't be as good of a fit for you. When they do that type of thing, I think we have to start doing that and have to start, like, again, having these conversations with our young people, our high school students and their parents, to have them, decide to, when they're looking at these schools, understand that, like, when you go to these schools, you're going to, as a student, you're going to add value to this campus. So this campus has to have something for you. And also you have to know what you want too. I just wanted to put that out there because I think that this is a conversation that part of a larger conversation that we have to start having in our community in order to kind of better prepare our children for making these decisions of great impact, such as like what institution they're going to attend for at least 4 years of their life.
No, and that's essential. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the reality is many of our student athletes, they make decisions on where they want to go for college based on, like you said, the coach, based on like the athletics. Like that's the primary component that they use to make their decisions. And then the academics is secondary, right? And I think we have to keep in mind that there are certain people who are going in there for the sole purpose of getting to the next level, whether that's the NFL, whether that's the NBA, whatever professional league you're trying to pursue. So academics not going to be high on the list. Unfortunately, that's the reality of it. And now that you have students who are going to be eligible to get paid, for their likeness. So now the NCAA is allowing student athletes to get paid for their likeness. So like with video games and other merchandise and all these other things, which I think is a great thing. I think it should have happened a long time ago. I think that's going to further sway more people to go into the direction of looking solely at the athletic programs and not putting as much attention on how they can benefit academically, because that's not what's central to their professional pursuit, if that makes sense. But that's a whole nother story for another day, man. We could talk about it all day. So, but let's talk about math. That's why we're here. So I know how math came into my life. I'm wondering, how did math come into your life? And was there a particular moment where you personally fell in love with it?
Not really. Not really a particular moment where I fell in love with. I think it was more of a gradual thing. So, I mean, I just was like typical, student, math was a requirement. There also, I mean, there was one year when I was very young that I was homeschooled by my mother. And, she instilled in me some math fundamentals back then. And then in school, I just typically always did well. I had some rough patches a couple of years. Like I remember being in the fourth grade and I was in this advanced math group and I didn't do very well. And I remember that feeling just of just not understanding the concepts, not excelling, and then also being able to look at my peers and see that they were excelling. And then that made me even more angry and upset, because comparatively I wasn't winning, I was losing, within the group dynamic. So I think, and that those are the types of things that I kind of have some memory of, the things I didn't understand and why I didn't understand it. So that like really fuels me in terms of like the tutoring that I do. It fuels me in terms of the videos that I post, the video content that I post on the All This Math YouTube channel, where I want students to be able to go there and use that as a resource, to gain understanding if they don't understand something in the class, in the whole group instruction in the school they're attending. And, I remember those things, it kind of, and it just, it motivates me in terms, I guess I do have a love for math. I do. What I should say is like, and it didn't happen at one moment. I think it was definitely gradual. And over time, just me learning more and more about it and just practicing more and more, I developed a love for it as a tool, because I really began to see it as a tool that, we can use definitely as people of African descent to, as, the late Dr. Jacob Carruthers would always say, to get ourselves out of this mess that we're in Western society, because I believe that the solution to our problems is independent nation building. And independent nation building is no small feat. It's not an easy task at all. It's going to be very challenging. It's going to require work. It's going to require effort, blood, sweat, and tears. A lot of people shy away from it. But the reality is we just have to choose what difficult route we want to go, because even trying to integrate and assimilate into a society with people that hate you and basically, want to kill you and, commit genocide against you, that's difficult also. So we have to basically, like, as people say, choose your heart. It's going to be hard regardless. But again, that's like a mathematical decision. Like, we should go the route that has the greatest. If both routes are difficult, we should go the route that has the greater outcome, the greater potential upside. So, by me linking, in terms of like the studies I've done of people in history, historical figures, and then seeing their connections to mathematics and just seeing how it's related to like liberation, how it's related to like revolution, how it's related to Pan-Africanism and Pan-African nationalism. It caused me to really like develop a love for it over time. And, and I want to also be able to have more of these conversations about the connections between pure mathematics and, the technical aspects of mathematics with social science, and with revolutionary struggle and, liberation work, and also like the Black radical tradition. Because I think that's one thing that's left out. And I think there need to be more people, like yourself and, like me that are, making these connections between social realities and the technical aspects of not just mathematics, but of STEM. Because oftentimes there's a lot of programming which again just fuels the assimilationism and integrationism, where the powers that be, they would like to have Black children excel in mathematics and gain skills in mathematics, but it's only so that we can go work for them and go work for their companies. And then they can also put us out on the forefront and say, see, look, there's no racism. Look at these Black kids from the hood that are doing well in math, and now they're going to go work for Google, or they can go work for IBM, or they can go work for Apple, but that doesn't really change the larger political and economic reality of the collective, right? So like the neighbor, like, you mentioned Duckery earlier. I live down the street from Duckery. Duckery's on Diamond Street, like 15th and Diamond. I live near 22nd and Diamond. Even if like Apple donates $1 million, I mean, they probably wouldn't donate $1 million, but they donated a significant portion of funds to just Duckery. And as a result, some students from Duckery end up becoming engineers. That's good. We can leverage that. We can take that and run with it. But the question is, how does it affect the larger community? Or does it actually just create more of a rift within the community? Because then you have this like kind of like class antagonism, between, oh, well, y'all are supposed to be like, the uppity Negroes, y'all learn math and the rest of us didn't. So, but a lot of that comes from, a lack of also like, political awareness. Whereas a lot of people would take that education and they say, okay, well, I'm going to use this as a tool to be able to get away from the rest from y'all black people, right? Because I'm also subconsciously and also directly being taught through school textbooks and through mainstream media that I should hate being black and I should hate black people. So I'm going to use the fact that I can do math to get away from black people, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to use the fact that I can do math and excel in math to build up our entire collective. And I want to take y'all with me, right?
Wow.
And I want to try to like create some type of infrastructure where we can win as a group, right? Now that doesn't mean that, you know, everybody wants to win. Everybody don't want to win, and some of those people you do have to leave behind. But at least if the thought fundamentally with these children that are being given these skills and given this ability is that I'm using this as a tool because I want us to collectively win, and not just so I can get out of the hood and get away from y'all. Because once you get out of the hood and get away, the white people are gonna come in and gentrify it anyway. So it's not gonna be the quote unquote hood no more anyway.
Right.
5 to 10 years later, if we can just try to change that mindset, we'll be better off. But again, these are the conversations that, you know, we have to have, you know, with our young people, because that math ability is a weapon. It's a weapon and it's a tool, but it has to be used in a way that really benefits us.
Wow, brother, you said a lot there, brother. So many different themes. But I do want to hone in on the independent nation building piece for a second, because I think that's essential. And when we think about the K-12 education system as it's currently constructed, as it has been constructed all these years, it was never set up for Black and brown folks to thrive. We know that, right? And what's amazing about Philly in particular is that, you know, we have the whole Freedom Schools movement. So, you know, Philly has a history of understanding the importance of independent nation building. And when you look at the different schools that are out there, you know, whether it's Sankofa, right, whether it's Kepra, right, and whether it's Imhotep, like there's so many schools I can name that understand the importance of providing a different brand of education to our Black and brown students. So within the context of math, how can we rebrand math in a way that's going to cultivate a love for our culture, but also change our perception of our ability to even do math, right? So people like to use the term growth mindset, right? But like, how can we rebrand it and reframe it in a way that gets our people to understand that, like, listen, like, we're the originators of this. Like, look at the ancient Cometians, you know what I'm saying, who built the pyramids, who created all the sciences and everything. Like, we don't get to teach that in a K-12 setting. That's not in the Common Core. So what can we do for our people, man?
Well, it's a few things, which kind of takes me back to, like, you know, why I decided to go hard and become more aggressive with building all this math, because all this math is meant to be an institution and a space where that work can be done. I believe in, you know, like the words of the late Omowale Malcolm X, and, you know, and him speaking about Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism, and, you know, a do for self mindset and a do for self mentality that we should have. And one of those aspects of doing for self is educating our own. So when we create, even if we have public schools that we don't control, right? I think that the public schools should become a place of practice only. And the community, the household, the community, the neighborhood should be this place where our children are taught, you know, the things that they need to know. And that happens already, but it's just that more like technical skills like mathematics, algebra, trigonometry, that's expected to be taught in a public school setting or a charter school setting or a parochial school setting. No one expects that the old head on your block is going to break down SOHCAHTOA to you. But I think the old head on your block should be able to break down SOHCAHTOA to you. And so we have to first start talking about that and letting our people know that this has to be an imperative, not just something nice, you know, that or something that would be nice. It's got to be imperative. And then also we have to be able to try to empower the old head on the block to know what SOHCAHTOA is and know how to teach it, you know, to his or her children, nieces and nephews, little cousins, younger siblings, etc. That's one of the things all this math is supposed to be. You know, it's like, you know, you can go to the YouTube channel, you can see a video, just how everything is on YouTube. You know, you can learn about almost anything on YouTube, you know, how to cook a certain dish, or how to change the brake pads on your car, or how to, you know, put on makeup a certain way, or how to put on eyelashes, or any of the things that are very popular and trendy right now. We can use the online platforms to try to be able to educate our people about certain things. And I think when you make it more mainstream and appeal to, the inner city community and the urban community, that's where a lot of the so-called popular culture comes from, the inner city. And then it's monetized by people that are outside of the inner city. And then they put a price tag on it and then sell it back to us. Kind of basically like mercantilism. It's really mercantilism, the same way like during, the transatlantic slave trade. It's like, okay, we're going to colonize this area. We're going to force the people to work, under the force of the barrel of a gun. We're going to force you to work, harvest all of your natural resources and minerals. Then we're going to steal them, take them back to our nation, employ our people to use them to build things. And then we're going to sell those things back to you. Right. So essentially, this is what happens with like, popular culture. Like we find out what the people in the hood or in the inner city are doing. And then, we put a price tag on it and then, we sell it back to you. So, with in terms of making mathematics more, mainstream or more cool, like we have to just have more of these conversations about math and how math can be useful. That's the question students always ask. And I think it's asked out of frustration. A lot of times, like, when am I going to use this? Or what do I need this for? But it's a valid question. It's a valid question. And I think as a teacher, I appreciate the fact that I've been challenged over the years to have to answer that question, because it's forced me to be more reflective on my own practice. And, like, why am I teaching this? Like, why do you need to know this? But that being constantly asked that question led me to understanding the political realities associated with mathematics and mathematics instruction. And the fact that if we're dealing with neo-colonial schools, which even the so-called good schools are still neo-colonial schools, because even though you won't have to worry about physical violence in the hallway between classes or getting jumped in the cafeteria. You may not have to worry about that, but there's still going to be the cultural violence of you being constantly reminded that, you're either a second-class citizen or you're somehow, subhuman. Right. But, the politics of, I was reminded of, it led me to understand the politics of that and how it's really about like what type of society do we live in, right, where math will be used, and who are the people that are going to use math. Right. Because we think about all the questions and all the different types of real world applications that you can go to any math textbook and find, whether it's an Algebra 1 textbook, Algebra 2, geometry, trig, calculus. When you look at these word problems, it's like, okay, no, these are problems that people that control societies and control nations have to worry about, right? Even statistics, right? With statistics, you're manipulating data, you're finding information, and you're manipulating it and utilizing it in a functional way so that you can make decisions about the future of this nation. But if we are just colonized people, and essentially second-class citizens, then when that young brother, that young sister raises her hand and says, man, when are we going to use this anyway? Now, if that's going to be the condition of our people, then it's like, sis, bro, you're not going to use it. As long as the current political construction is in place, you're not going to use geometry, because the way the system is set up, this system needs people to be prisoners. This system needs people to do menial labor, to work at Walmart, right? This system needs people to work in fast food. That's what this system needs. So, because we're essentially, helping to, we're always, one thing I say, we're always nation building. The question is, are we building our nation or somebody else's, right? So as we're helping to build somebody else's nation, then a lot of the time we're going to end up just, doing this menial labor that helps to maintain the status quo of this nation that's already in place. So if we should teach the math, but we have to go beyond just teaching the math, and we have to start to think about how can we create a different political reality, because under the current political reality, and this is one of the things that also like the late Dr. Amos Wilson talked about, under the current political reality, it's a necessity for Black children to be deficient in mathematics. It's a necessity, because once, Black children become proficient in mathematics, and then they become adults that are proficient in mathematics, that can then in turn help their own children to be proficient in mathematics. Now you have this group of people that, since the creation of this country, this nation state or what have you, has needed to keep us undereducated and miseducated in order for it to thrive and exist. Now it just upsets everything. So now everything is changing. So then, but once we start talking about, well, you know what, instead of, us just wanting to grow up and become rich and buy the Bentley, which is a British company, right, that we're, supporting when we do that, or the Rolls Royce, which, British company, or maybe I think they merged with BMW. So I'm not sure if it's a German company now, if it's still British, I'm not sure. But then we say, okay, no, we need our own car companies. Right. So now it's like, okay, now I understand. This is why I need to know algebra, because I need to know algebra because we have to solve these problems about how are we going to have the resources to create these things in terms of engineering. How are we going to build an efficient model that will be cost effective and that, will be safe for people to drive around in? And these are all the questions that engineers deal with. These are all the questions that like urban planners deal with. But as long as we're not like on a large scale thinking about how to do those things, then, the mathematics, it really isn't as relevant per se. It really becomes just an issue of, well, I'm going to do well just so I can get a good grade. But even with that, it's like, okay, you get the good grade and then what? Then what you going to do with it? Again, like thinking more and more about, mathematics and being more reflective. And again, with the students asking that question constantly, like, what am I going to use this for? It forced me to think about that. Like, and it, I started, and it makes you think about the larger society that you live in and the political reality of the society that you live in. And then you say, okay, well, it's kind of, makes me think of like Julius Nyerere, who, was the leader in Tanzania. And when they were trying to get from under the control of the British as a British colony, and they were talking about making changes to the educational system, before he instituted, and Nyerere was a former teacher himself before he went into politics, or before he became a political leader. One of the things he said was, before we make these individual micro level changes in the school system and in the classrooms, we have to talk about what type of society we want on a macro scale. Like, what type of society do we want first and foremost? And then after that, then we can have a more specific conversation about how that's going to translate to what's taking place inside the classrooms and how we need to train our teachers differently now that we're getting from under the yoke of colonialism, of British colonialism and whatnot. But a lot of times, like in the United States and, in places like Philly and, other major cities where Black people live, we're not having that conversation. It's as if we want to maintain the larger system. Many of us just want to reform these different little aspects, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, their principal, come up with a program. There are principals that'll buy it. They got money in their budget for it. They'll buy it or whatever. But long term, it doesn't really change anything until we start really thinking about, are we trying to change the larger society? And, and at least having these conversations with the young people about changing the larger society. Because really, and this is something in Nkrumah, your name is Kwame. So I know you're down with Nkrumah. Nkrumah is my guy.
My family's from Ghana. So we all about Nkrumah, man.
Yeah, definitely. So Nkrumah said himself, like, reform actually makes the current power structure even more powerful, because what reform does is like a small tweak of the system. So
it's incrementalism, basically. It's all incrementalism, and that just maintains the power structure.
It maintains the power structure because it's like, okay, we're not going to destroy it or get rid of it or replace it. We're just going to reform it a little bit and give some small concessions to the people that are complaining or the people that are being oppressed. So actually, that really empowers the system. Right. And when it needs to be just scrapped and just destroyed and replaced, like Nas said, destroy and rebuild. Right. Or Stillmatic. Right. So that's what needs to happen eventually. We may not be in a position to, effectively do that right now, but at least that needs to be the conversation or the goal. Right. A lot of it is not meant to the conversation in education is not meant to really change the larger society, when actually the education system is going to either maintain or, change the larger society. And math, to your original question, like math fits like squarely within that, because being able to quantify, do quantitative analysis, do quantitative reasoning, all these types of things is needed. I mean, think about the people that are in power, the groups that are in power, well, let me say this instead. I've been doing some review and some study of calculus, because I want to start adding calculus. I don't have any calculus videos on my YouTube channel, but I want to start adding calculus videos to my YouTube channel. And I'm really reading the actual preface of the textbook that I've been using. And it's talking about Fermat, who was a French guy. It's talking about Isaac Newton, who was British. Another guy named Wallace, who was also British. And these guys lived in the 17th century. So we can infer that, okay, well, we look historically and say, what else was going on in the 17th century? Transatlantic slave trade, European imperialism is really kicking off. So there's no way that we should think that what these guys were doing in terms of utilizing mathematics as a tool and developing theories, mathematical theories, had nothing to do with the enslavement of African people on the African continent. And it's not to say that these guys really invented or created or discovered, calculus, because I just refuse to believe that, even though many textbooks will tell you that, okay, yeah, they were the inventors, they were the creators. I think they may have recognized some things in nature that, people will just recognize in nature, right? And I think our ancestors recognized it 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years earlier. But again, like, I bring that up to show that those that are in power, they're using math to maintain their power. So if we're going to gain our own power, use our own power to, get from under the yoke of those that are in power and that are oppressing us, we're gonna have to use math too. And I think that's the conversation we have to have in terms of, like, what are we gonna use that? I think that should be added to the responses when somebody asks, what are we gonna use this for? But also knowing that there are different, and this is one thing I learned throughout my career as well, is that there are different responses for different people based upon their station in life and based upon what they want for themselves. Because for some people, it's like, okay, well, what are you gonna use it for? It's like, bro, you're not gonna use this. Like, I know you. I watch you every day. You're not going to use this, right? Because this is not, but him over there, he can potentially use it, and I can lay it out. I can lay out the potential uses for it for him. But there are some different responses for different people.
No, you're just speaking facts right now, and I feel like if a middle schooler were to ask me that question, what am I going to use this for? Why do I need to learn this algorithm, right? It doesn't apply to what I want to do. And I can't just tell them, well, this is about us connecting with our diasporan brothers and sisters, because that's just way over their head, right?
Right.
But I do believe that when you think about math and we think about the internalized racism that we have with our relationship with math as a result of the condition that we had to go through in K to 12 about how, just as Black and brown folks, we're not supposed to be good at math. No. I mean, there was a brother who wrote an article about this. He's a professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago. His name is Dr. Danny Bernard Martin. And he talks about the racial hierarchy of mathematical ability, where Black, Indigenous, and Latinx folks are at the bottom of this power structure, and then you have white and Asian folks at the top, right? And he just really breaks that down. So I'm just wondering, like, when I think about Pan-Africanism, think about the fact that so much is tied to our context here in America as Black people. Like, when you think about capitalism, when you think about just how money is allocated and just our economic situation, right? That's all math related. And it's amazing how we don't always, as a collective, see that connection, and just the fact that it also impacts our brothers and sisters throughout the diaspora. So I'm of the firm belief that in order for us to even come together as a collective, we have to, meet and figure out, like we have to have an understanding, right? Because, you mentioned Julius Nyerere and Kwame Nkrumah and all the other leaders. Like, that was when Pan-Africanism was strong. That movement was strong back then. And then I feel like we're still trying to rebirth it in this current context, but we're getting to our own way.
And another thing about them that's important for us to recognize is that in terms of Nkrumah and Nyerere, and in terms of that, they kind of had different views on how Pan-Africanism should manifest itself, but they were still able to work with each other. I think that's an important lesson in and of itself, is that we're going to have differences in terms of, I guess, application or tactics. And that's fine, as long as we don't differ, I guess, in the concept of principles. We don't differ along the lines of principle. Like, we have the same principle, but maybe there's we believe that, this strategy should be used, or somebody else thinks, a different strategy should be used, or a different tact. But then you have to just have those conversations about, okay, well, how are we going to most effectively work together? We do have the same goal. We have the same outcome in mind, but, like, what would be the most appropriate? But to your other point, showing the connections is like, a lot of us don't understand the transitive property. So we often think that one thing has nothing to do with the other.
Exactly.
So, and in terms of, like, the young people wanting to learn, like, about word problems as an example, and they say, and a lot of times, and here's one of those answers to that question of, like, when am I going to use this stuff? It's like with sports, it's like sports training. You're developing a skill. You're developing, like, a mathematical muscle. And with that, you can apply that to anything, any problem you have. So you can learn and train and be trained to approach mathematical problems in a textbook in a certain way, and go through a systematic process. And then once you are accustomed to that systematic process is not limited to you sitting in a math classroom. You can apply that same systematic process in an issue with a significant other, with your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, with your parents, with a coworker, with a supervisor at your job that may be difficult. We recognize that we have problems. And a lot of times we don't have these systematic processes that we can use to solve problems. So it leaves us no choice but to just react to situations emotionally and just get angry and just punch somebody. And then or just curse somebody out.
Sure.
And in the immediate moment, you may feel empowered by doing that, but in the terms of the long term, it's like, no, you really didn't win, because then that person, let's say you're at your job and you get mad and you just curse your supervisor out, and then it's like, well, I felt good. I told him, or I told her, and then you find out, 10 minutes later, security is coming to your cubicle because you've been terminated immediately, and they're about to escort you to the front door. So you really didn't win, but perhaps if you had a systematic process for how to deal with problems that you had learned as a youth and as a student that you had practiced over and over again, because it's just like dealing with an equation, right? I'm trying to get this outcome, but I got to think, how do I go about this? I could do this or I could do that. It's like, we're evaluating an expression. Like, okay, if I do this, then this might be the outcome. And then it helps our children to understand the concept of, like I tell my daughter this all the time. She's 9, consequential thinking. Like what's the potential consequence? If you do this, what's the outcome going to be? If you do that, what's the outcome going to be? If you do this, what's the outcome going to be? Right? Or what's a potential outcome? Because we can't really predict the future, but we can use deductive reasoning to kind of think, well, the last time I did this was the outcome. So we can trust that it's probably going to happen again. Right.
Right.
And just in terms of getting, young people to understand that, okay, there are going to be consequences to your actions. So you shouldn't just fly off the handle and just do whatever, because you got to be prepared to deal with those consequences, and let them know that you really do have the freedom to do whatever you want to do in life, but you will never have the freedom of freedom from not having to deal with the consequences, because you will have to deal with consequences in anything,
And I think,
and all of this is mathematical. All of this is mathematical. This is just like this. It's a mathematical approach to life. It really is. And we get there from solving equations, solving systems of equations, finding out what's the equation of this parabola. Like, we start to just look at life through a mathematical lens. And, again, so like I said, that's one of the answers, to that question, to the student's question. When am I going to use this stuff? You're not going to be in a grocery store and have to take out, a piece of paper and, use the quadratic formula. Like, you're not, right? But the same skills that you use when you're in a classroom using the quadratic formula, you will use when you're in a grocery store to decide, okay, you're going to take the same approach when you decide, okay, I have this amount of money and I need this much food, to last me for this week or maybe for the next 2 weeks. So what should I buy? Because there are different products that are made by different manufacturers that have different prices. So again, it's about having a systematic approach. The quadratic formula is a formula. It's a set of rules. It's a rule, which is a systematic approach to solving a problem, finding out the value of a variable, of an unknown. So we use the same type of systematic approach in any scenario, even if we're grocery shopping.
See, there you go. And I think with math, there's a hidden curriculum within the math curriculum. And it's the hidden curriculum that can take us to a path towards Pan-Africanism. It can take us to a path towards liberation, right? And all these other, things that we're throwing out there. So you mentioned systems of equations, right? When we think about the different ways in which we can solve systems of equations, whether we're talking about substitution, elimination, graphing, right? I look at math as a GPS system. So when you're driving the car, the GPS is going to take you down a certain path. But what does the GPS do? Let's say it's Waze, right? If they know that there's mad traffic somewhere, they're going to reroute and take you a different direction. And that's essentially what math is. Math is one of those things where it's not just learning this one way, right? And that's what is in alignment with white supremacist culture. Is like, all right, we're going to give you this prescribed way of solving this particular problem. And we're not going to give you the space to explore other avenues you can take to get to that same outcome. Like, that's not welcome. And And I think when I look at math, if we allow our students to just be more exploratory in order to build their critical thinking, right? That's going to help them solve problems in life, because math in many ways is a metaphor for life.
Yeah.
It really is, if you think about it. So like you mentioned, you may not have to solve that two-step equation. You may not have to evaluate this expression and substitute these variables, with certain values, right? You may not even have to remember what a coefficient is. Those things are irrelevant. What's most relevant is the hidden curriculum that you're being taught through the medium of math. And I think that's what gets lost, is the critical thinking that you build from solving that equation, from making a decision as to whether or not you should balance that equation, and in order to isolate the variable. Like, there's a decision that you have to make. There's a process that you have to go through. It's not just, let me just solve for this variable. It's like, how do you get there? What is your thought process?
Systematic process.
See what I mean? And that's what we don't focus on. And I think that's why now, when people say things such as, all right, we need for students to build their conceptual knowledge versus the procedural knowledge, right? Like, that's what we've been talking about. It ain't about just following the steps. Like, do you understand why you're doing these steps? The why.
Right. Because then once you have that conceptual knowledge, and again, as a way to reflect, like, that's something that early in my career I wasn't very good at. Because even as a student, I was always like, I was weak conceptually. Conceptually, I was weak, right? But I was always good at, like, okay, I could memorize processes. I didn't know why the process made sense. Yeah, exactly. Like, I didn't know why the process made sense. When somebody would later tell me, or I might arrive at it like, oh, that's why that makes sense. So, but when it's conceptual, when the conceptual knowledge and the conceptual understanding is there, then you don't have to worry as much about memorization. It's kind of like with when you do a lesson on like literal equations, and then you tell the students, like, okay, when you're in your science classes, this is going to help you, because there might be one formula, right? From that one formula, we can derive like maybe 6 different formulas from it. Now, if you understand the algebra and you understand conceptually how the algebra works, then you don't got to worry about memorizing all them formulas, right? You got to just memorize the one formula. And then from that formula, you can break down and figure out what the other formulas are, right? Whether it's in your physics class, your chemistry class, your biology class, or what have you. But because you understand the concept of solving equations, you understand the concept of how to isolate variables, and why does this work, right? I mean, if you want to memorize a whole bunch of formulas, more power to you. But once you understand that concept, it's like, and I think experiences like that, part and parcel of how over time I developed my love for mathematics, right? Realizing and recognizing for myself, like, oh, that's why that works. So that's why that makes sense. And I can remember I might have been in a classroom. I might have had an aha moment in one of my classrooms, maybe in 2015. And then I'm thinking back to 1991 when I was in the 7th grade. And I remember being so confused about this, or like why this didn't make sense. And then here it is, like, 24 years later, I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it now. Crazy. This makes sense now. Right. And I think that's like the beauty of it. But yeah, man, like, conceptual understanding of math is key. And then because you can apply it in other ways. You're not as kind of locked in. And also I want to say something too, in terms of the conversations we have with young people about having more variety and having more freedom to use different methods. So many of our students are taught that there's only one way.
Yes.
It's almost like monotheism, right? It's like monotheistic mathematics, right? There's only one way to do this problem. And they're taught and conditioned that way and trained that way. So if in 6th grade, their teacher taught them how to solve the equation this one way, and then in 7th grade, now they're in your class, and then you're showing them a different way, it's like they get anxiety, they get nervous. Like, wait, what you doing? What you doing? Miss so-and-so didn't teach us how to do it that way. You can't do it. You can't do that. And then you're like, wait, hold on. I understand she taught you this way. That's cool. I want you to be able to solve this equation in as many ways as possible. Because, for real, you might decide that you like this way better. Or you might go into an 8th grade class, that your 8th grade math class, and then that teacher might teach you a different way. So now 3 different ways. So it's like, don't look at it as a problem or a challenge or an issue that there's more than one way to do the problem. Look at it as beneficial to you, because then you can pick and choose and decide. And like you mentioned, systems of equations, depending on how I feel a certain day, I might be like, yeah, I think I'm gonna substitute this joint. I'm gonna use substitution right now. And another day I might feel like I might be in the mood for elimination. And another day I might be in the mood for graphing. Or another day I might want to graph, but it's like, I don't got no graph paper. And I don't want to draw my own graph on notebook paper. I don't want to do that. All right, so I'm not using graphing method. I'm gonna do substitution method. I'm gonna do that.
Sure.
But the power is in having those different methods and having that luxury to be able to say, oh, okay, I can pick and choose what method, and then we're gonna get to the same correct answer either way. Like with Waze, you know, you can put into the settings, I want to avoid tolls. I don't want to pay no tolls, right?
There you go.
Or I can say I want to take the scenic route, or I don't want to take no highways, or I want to go the shortest distance, or the shortest, or the longest shortest amount of time. We can do those types of things. We have options. So with math, we got to kind of like retrain a lot of our students, because they're kind of taught a lot of times that there's only one way to do it. Like I said, it's monotheistic mathematics. It's like there's one way to do it. And if you don't do it this way, then you're wrong, right? And I don't know that teachers, I mean, there may be some teachers that are explicitly saying that, but I think they have to just be more clear. Like, listen, like letting the students know, like, I want you, because like in my classes at Cheney, I'm teaching education majors. I'm teaching them how to teach the math concepts on the K through 8 levels. And I'm letting them know, like, okay, this is one way to do this. But I'm very adamant about the fact that this is only one way. This is not the only way. This is only one way. I want your students to know, like, if we're talking about multiplication, I want them to know the lattice method. I want them to know partial products. I want them to know the traditional vertical
standard algorithm.
Standard algorithm. I want them to know. I want them to know all of that, and I want you to be able to like teach all of that. And then I want them to be able to sit back and be like, you know, I think I'm gonna do the lattice method with this one. Oof. Well, like, nah, you know what? Maybe I'll do partial products. You know, so it's really about having choices. You know, it's kind of like
with our
clothes. It's like with our clothes. Like, you know, I might put this shirt on today, or I might put this shirt on today. I might put another. Like we have options. So we want to see math as like a way to, like, you know, be able to exercise options. So we want to do that. So we got to have those conversations with the young people. They don't feel uncomfortable with having the option and feeling uncomfortable with like using the option. You know?
Right. And I think with that too, I mean, think about it. You know, we're in this era where everything is predicated on standardized testing. So I taught in Pennsylvania, I taught in Philly. So every year, all the talk was about PSSA. Yeah. PSSA every single year. That was like the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
And I think because there's so much pressure for teachers to perform, we end up taking a paternalistic approach to teaching math, where we want to do what's best for students. And in the process of doing what's best for students, we provide them with these prescribed methods, which we feel will get them to the answer the quickest, as opposed to opening up their creativity and innovations for them to explore or make those discoveries for themselves, right? Because that's too much time. You know, we have a scope of sequence. We have to pace these lessons within a certain time. I only get, you know, you worked at the school district of Philadelphia, so you get a scope of sequence. They tell you you need to spend 1 week on this skill or this standard, and this is how you get this done within a week. But we all know that that's not realistic, because you may have you may have students with IEPs. You may have students with 504 plans. You may have students who just start tripping for whatever reason, and that just sets you back. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, there's certain factors that will come into play that will cause that momentum to stall. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to, you know, maybe reteach a lesson, which then goes against the timeline.
Right.
But that's the mentality that we're in, because the way that our students perform is tied to their evaluation. Like, that's just the reality. So, if this is how I'm supposed to teach it, I'm going to teach it that way. So there's a lot of pressure that comes with that.
Yeah, so one of the skills you have to develop as an educator, and it's much easier said than done, is find that balance. Like, how do I effectively teach, you know, and provide enough practice and enough time on a topic, and be able to fulfill the demands of the scheduling, the demands of the scope and sequence. Like, how do I do both? I'm hoping that, you know, students will, you know, tap into the All This Math YouTube channel, and that'll be like their supplementary, you know, help if they're not, if the amount of time allotted, you know, in the classroom is not enough, and they don't, you know, the teacher can't really cater to the individual learning styles of everybody in the room, which is usually impossible because there's so many different learning styles and so many different, backgrounds. And, a lot of students have different levels and amounts of prior knowledge on the topic, so hopefully, they go to the YouTube channel, pull up a video, and then they can just watch it, at their own convenience, in the comfort of their own home, on their smartphone or on their laptop or their tablet or, whatever they have. These are real challenges. The real challenges that, are prevalent in the classrooms. And we got to figure out ways to kind of get around them and kind of, and speaking of testing, it's like, we got to make the testing irrelevant, just make it, and I understand the position a lot of people take in terms of challenging the testing in and of itself, which makes sense. I get that. However, in a lot of cases, I think that what we can do is just, provide them the skills to be able to excel on the test. Just like make the test irrelevant. Like we all know, like the SAT is culturally biased. Like we know that. We've known that for years. So we could either challenge the SAT to change, which I don't know how effective that has been over the years or how effective it will be going forward. Or, because it's really an issue of choosing your battles. Or we can just teach the students how to perform on that test and how to perform in that space. And I mean, I think that's what we do anyway with a lot of our children, based on what your background is and what your politics are as a parent anyway, when they're going into hostile educational spaces that we understand are neo-colonial. You prepare them to thrive in those spaces. So with a stand, whether it's a standardized test, like a state offered standardized test, or if it's a college entrance exam like SAT or ACT, I think we have to probably just do more SAT prep, and at an earlier age. I think I want to advocate that we start doing SAT prep at the middle school level, maybe even elementary school level, start the elementary school level. A lot of people wait till high school, and it's not that high school is too late, but the work will be, it's like you're providing yourself more time, by spreading it out, so it's less stress, start earlier, start early. So you have less stress. So you're like, you're cramming, the closer you are to the actual date of the test, if you're taking a test, you start preparing your child for a test that they're going to be taking in 7 years. They're a sixth grader. It's like, you're going to take this in 12th grade, but I'm going to start preparing you now. So you got 7 years. So maybe you just do a little bit each week. It's very low stress. But, when you're in 12th grade and you're doing your first being introduced to SAT prep, now you got this, this thick book, right?
Oh man,
this thick book.
Yeah.
And now you're worried because I gotta go through every page of this book, like, within a couple of months, on top of all my coursework, on top of all my school coursework, on top of that, it's a different situation. So that's why I advocate for SAT prep to start at the 6th grade level. Now, I've never done that. I've never offered SAT prep to a 6th grader. I know it can be done, but I don't know exactly what that would look like, because the 6th grader hasn't taken high school geometry course yet. They haven't taken a high school algebra 1 course yet.
Right.
They haven't taken a high school probability and statistics level course yet. But I know it can be done. But again, I'm putting it out there, but I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's got to be done in the right way. And that's one of the things that, I need to think about in terms of my offerings, through the company. It's like SAT, like middle school SAT prep. What does that look like? And how can we offer that and make it effective so that you're not waiting until 11th grade or 12th grade? You don't want your child overwhelmed.
Right.
But, you start early. How do we best do that? Something to think about.
No, for sure. And I think theoretically, it makes sense, right? But I'm wondering, if we're preparing our students that early with SAT prep, are we focusing more on the test taking strategies, or are we focusing more on the content itself? Because in order to really do well on SAT, it's really a combination of both. It's not so much about, it's not just all about content knowledge. It's about how well do you take a test. Right. If you're on a problem, are you on that problem for 90 seconds or 45 seconds? Do you have the discipline? Do you have the wherewithal to say, all right, this answer is not coming to me right now. Let me just hop to the next question and come back to it, right? Yeah. Like, what are we prioritizing at that stage if they're in, let's say, 6th grade?
At that stage, I might prioritize test-taking skills.
Right.
I might do that, like back solving, especially if we're talking about the multiple choice sections of the SAT math.
True.
Because the key is, one of the keys that's often overlooked is like process of elimination. Like, how do I rule out the wrong answers? Because once I rule out wrong answers, if I got 4 multiple choice possibilities, I know if I'm able to just look at them and say, okay, from what I know about algebra or from what I know about number sense, I know these 2 got to be wrong. C and D have to be wrong. So now I've just increased my odds of getting it right, even if I guess anyway, just off the break. And then those skills are transferable. So even if they're like, in school, just taking a random, their teacher might make up a multiple choice test in any subject. It could be in any subject. And then they're learning how to like rule out wrong answers. That's definitely an important skill. And again, they're going to use it 7 years later, when they're in the 12th grade sitting for the SAT. So,
True.
I mean, content is definitely important, but I want to say those test taking skills will probably be, more important at first, but not that much more important. Like, I still would say,
right.
If you haven't seen, like, of course, they haven't taken a high school level as a 6th grader, you haven't taken a high school level Algebra 1 course, but we can introduce you to some of those concepts. We can introduce those concepts. And that's another conversation for us to have too, about what the public charter and even parochial schools are offering our children versus what they can handle. Like, I know from experience, dealing with my own children, that their curriculums that they've had in the schools they've attended do not match up with what I've offered them. Because like me being a math teacher and a math professor, I'm like, okay, no, they're going to get this, this, and this. I know the school is not giving them this, but I'm not really worried about the fact that the school is not giving them this. But I know what they're going to get with me. I know what I'm going to expose them to. But then if they're able to gain proficiency at it, then it begs the question, well, why aren't they getting it in school? And now we get back into the politics. We get back into the politics of education, the politics of mathematics. And then again, because the first thing somebody might say is, well, your children are different. It's probably something in their DNA. I don't believe that. I don't believe they were born with a greater propensity to understand mathematics. Right? I don't believe that. So their classmates should be able to do this too. At least many of their classmates should be able to understand some of these concepts as well. But yet it's not on the curriculum for students in that grade and at that level. So then we have to ask the question, why is that? And now that takes us back to the politics. Like I said, the politics of education, the politics of mathematics education specifically. And when we understand, in and of itself, formal education is an act of social engineering. Social engineering may sound negative, but in and of itself, social engineering is not a bad thing. But the way social engineering manifests itself for children of African descent, or if we want to say Black people or what have you, it manifests itself in a way to keep us at the lower rung of society. And once we understand that and take that seriously, then we as a collective, or more of us, even as individuals, more of us start to make some different decisions about how we're educating our own children.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, then you're right, man, because I think it's a question of pedagogy too. Like, the reason why the students that you work with understand the math at a more advanced level is because of the pedagogical choices you're making as the instructor. And I think for a lot of us, we rely too much on the scripts and we don't take the time to build our craft and enhance it in a way that's going to strengthen our instructional approach.
Right.
But also, you have to consider the cultural context as well. We have to look at the learners in front of us. How can we best transmit this information to each of these learners, given their cultural context, given where they're coming from, given their own history with math, right? Do they even have all the prerequisites to even understand what you're teaching them? Because some of them are coming with gaps, right? With areas where we need to address. But that's the homework that we have to do as educators, as math educators. We have to identify those. And for some of us, that's just too much work. I mean, just keeping it real. That's just too much work because we trying to beat the clock. PSSA time. We trying to beat this clock. But yeah, we're gonna have to do a part 2 of this because there's so much to unpack here, bro. There's so much to unpack here. So I see that. So we're pretty much running low on time. So what I do want to do with you, real quick, this will be the fastest lightning round that we've had on this podcast. So I just want to ask a couple questions. I want to do a quick start bench cut. So I have 3 strands of math. You're going to either start one, bench one, cut one based on your personal preference, what you like, right? So I have geometry, algebra, calculus, start, bench, cut. What's the order that you have?
So I really can't honestly participate in this because I can't cut none
Oh,
of them. I could start one and bench two. Can I
all
start
right.
one and bench two?
All right, we can remix it. Sure.
All right, I'm gonna start calculus because calculus is like what I'm really focused in heavy in on right now. Calculus is the area of mathematics that I'm trying to increase my own aptitude in and get my level of teaching proficiency up to where my level of teaching proficiency is with algebra and geometry. So I'm starting calculus right now. I'm gonna bench the other two because I can't get rid of them. I got to find money in my budget for them. I can't
I
trade them.
respect that.
I can't trade them. Can't trade them to another team. I can't do it. I got to
I
bench both
respect
of
that,
those.
man. That's a first, but I respect that move. I respect that. Just a quick note on calculus. I mean, when I first got to Temple, the first 3 math classes I took were all calculus classes. Calculus 1, 2, and 3. And those were among the toughest classes I ever took, man.
Yeah.
Dealing with the integrals and oh man. It just brings back some
time and the
memories.
time constraint. So it's like, you know, you got to
Oh man.
like Calc 1 is like a year of high school calculus crammed into 4 months. So then
no, you're right.
It's the time constraint. So it's like that's another issue. So again, like back when we was talking about the SAT prep, like giving our children time, starting that prep early. So it's like you want to, we got to come back and talk more about this. I got to come back. We can talk more about this. But yeah, the time constraints is what really does it. Again, that's math. The X variable on the XY plane. You know, the more time you have, time is that most important variable. Like my dad always told me as a young child, time is the only resource that you can't get more of. Like once the time is gone, it's gone. You can get more of anything else. You just can't get time. You know,
there you go.
I guess that's why, Back to the Future was such a popular movie, because that concept of being able to go back in time, you get time back, so inventing a time machine is a big deal because we know time is the only resource that you can't get more of.
Yes, sir. Sir.
But yeah, I want to also say, like, that was Bob Moses' thing, him and Charles Cobb, when they wrote Radical Equations, they're talking about they want every child to be calculus ready by their first semester of college, because a lot of our students are not calc ready. They want to be engineers, they want to be computer scientists, but then they look at the course sequence and like, oh, I should be taking Calc 1 freshman year, first semester in the fall. Wait a minute, I never even seen trigonometry before. How I'm gonna take Calc 1?
See.
Or I barely got through Algebra 2 in my high school. I never took pre-calculus. How I'm gonna take that's an issue. So we're not.
Yeah.
I want our children to be calc ready. So rest in peace to Bob Moses. That was one of the things that I learned from him in his book. That he co-authored with Charles Cobb. I want our children to be calc ready, even if they never took calc. I want them to be able to go into college first semester, sit in the classroom, and be able to rock out in a Calc 1 class.
Yes, rest in power, great Bob Moses. He's a godfather when we talk about just liberation work within that mathematical context. True legend. So, but man, Akil, man, thank you so much, bro. This has been a dope conversation. Wish we had more time. But we're gonna try to do a part 2 of this. But before you roll out, please let the good people know how they can connect with you on social media. Also, go ahead and share that website for all this math. And we didn't even get to hystematics, man. You got to talk to them at least a little bit about that, because that's some powerful stuff you're doing.
Okay, so you can follow me on Instagram at all this math, ALLTHISMATH. Also have a Facebook page at all this math, and I haven't set up the Twitter page yet. The Twitter page is coming, but check me out on all this math. The website is allthismath.com. Should I type it into the chat and then you post it?
No. What I'm gonna do is, what we do is, for every episode we have episode notes. So in the notes, I'll have all of your handles and the website. So we good with that.
Okay, yeah. So all this math is the website. You can go there and kind of see a little bit about my background, and that's really, the website is mainly used for people sending inquiries for math tutoring. But there's a link in the website to the YouTube channel, because I'm really putting a lot of energy and time into promoting the YouTube channel, because that's what I want to really create a presence on that platform. Basically, just provide an alternative to Khan Academy, because I've I've had tutoring sessions where students needed help with the Khan Academy video,
Okay.
So, I'm
For
trying
sure.
to, trying to like cut out the middleman and just, provide my own explanations on my own YouTube channel, because, there are thousands of math videos on YouTube. A lot of them aren't very culturally relevant,
Sure.
to children of African descent, African American children, or American African children, as some people say. That's what I'm providing. And I'm also promoting things like, HBCUs. You see me in the video with a, Morgan State sweatshirt on, or, you see me in the video with a, a Malcolm X hoodie, something like that. So, you don't get there's not a lot of that on YouTube.
Nah, you don't
brother,
see that. Nah,
black
not at
man going over, teaching how to factor a quadratic expression with a Malcolm X hoodie on. You're not going to see that. But if you want to see that, then you definitely come to my YouTube channel. You'll see a lot of that.
There you go.
Yeah,
for sure. We trying to get more of the Dwayne Waynes out there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. He influenced me. Watching a different world. He was cool. He had his Jordan. He had his number 4 Jordans on, and he was an engineering major.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, and he ended up teaching. He was teaching calculus at Hillman.
He sure was.
Black
he was
man.
nice. He was nice with it. With it. But that was an inspiration, for a lot of folks like us who got into the field, man. So shout out to Kadeem Hardison, aka Dwayne Wayne. So yes, sir. All right, brother. But man, it's been great to have you on. And like I said, we're gonna have to keep this thing going, because this is a conversation that doesn't happen often enough in our education circles and even within our community. In general. So we gotta keep this dialogue going for sure.
Yeah, let me know in part 2, man. Like, send me some dates. Let me know how we can make that happen.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely connect on that and try to set something up. But good brother, man, I wish you a good rest of the day. And yeah, we're gonna keep on liberating our people, man. That just keep on doing the good work.
Got to.
Yes, sir.
Got to, bro. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Peace.
Peace.
All right, people. We about to end another episode of our Dane Talk for Educators Live. And as always, I wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.